Be careful what you say or tweet on social media because you don't know when it could come back and cancel you. Are we seeking to allow growth through accountability, or are we simply imposing our points of view by public shaming? I'm Nina, and I'm your host of Anti-Cancel Culture.
Good evening. Welcome back for another episode 5 of Anti-Cancel Culture. It is such a joy to be here. Tonight, we have Crystal Joseph, who is a licensed clinical psychologist and author, with a private practice based out of Silver Spring, Maryland. Tonight, we're going to be discussing mental health, the Black community, and all things empowering. We really need to have this discussion. So without any further ado, Crystal Joseph, welcome to Anti-Cancel Culture.
Hi, thank you for having me. Hi, Nina. Hi, everyone tuning in.
Hello. You're such a beauty. We're going to jump. I'm so excited about this conversation. It's been quite a rough week.
Yes.
It feels like every week is, right? There's a weight that comes with it, but this is exactly why these conversations are necessary. And so let us hop right into the thing. Should we cancel calling the police during a mental health crisis?
That's a great question. I think for certain locales, yes. And for other locales, not so much. There are some it's called co-location of mental health professionals with the police. However, we've heard due to resources, budgeting, things of that nature, they don't always show up when you make those calls to the non-emergency number or the crisis number. So do your research with your counties and your cities, and you can actually decide whether to contact the mobile crisis unit or the crisis access line before contacting the police or the other authorities.
And so that's good. So you gave us a couple other options. Yes. And so if you could, when the police are not the answer, again, you called it the mobile.
Yes, it's mobile crisis. Most counties and states have mobile crisis units, and it's not a short form 3-digit number. It is a long form 10-digit number. So you're going to have to dial the area code and the number and contact them. Mostly all of them are 24 hours. The access line that I mentioned is known to this area a bit, where you would call during the daytime to be assessed or have a loved one assessed and go through that pipeline. But the mobile crisis unit is your best option in that regard.
Very good. Very good. Thank you so much for that information. And I know there are lots of different advocates who are trying to get that 3-digit number, right?
Yes.
So that we can quickly make these decisions and get the help that we need. As it pertains to mental health in the Black community, right? This is something that we haven't really been addressing traditionally. So how do we even properly respond to a crisis in our homes, at work, and socially if we're not even quite yet comfortable with having these conversations or even acknowledging mental health as something that we need to deal with?
No, that's a good point. I mean, I definitely think go to someone that you trust, but also you don't want to overwhelm that person at the same time. So if it's auntie, if it's godmommy, if it's uncle, if it's granddaddy, talk to them. And then as a community, I think we need to band together and understand that going to see a therapist or a psychologist or a counselor doesn't make you crazy. Right. And you can also go to church and sit on the therapist's couch at the same time. It's okay. It's all right. So, definitely check in with each other. But start there and then do your research and look at who would be the best fit. Just like we shop around for various things, there's nothing wrong with calling and looking at websites.
That's good. And I'm glad that you brought up the point of it's okay to go to church, okay? and please still get professional help. Because a lot of churches don't necessarily have mental health professionals on staff. And it's something that we are even in the church community are still coming to terms with as well. I recently saw Chris Rock on with Trevor Noah, and he was talking about, and I've heard this said before, that The Rock may go to the gym 6 hours a day on leg day alone, right? And we go to the gym and we take care of our bodies and we really try to make it a point to build our physical selves, but we don't address our mental health as if it's something that, what, if you could, just for me, what do you think the stigma is around it?
For us, I think it's transgenerational or generational as far as how we're educated. And yes, the impetus is placed on the body and the physical health. And I tell my clients this, but I tell people the word phrase mind-body connection. Whenever you see the word phrase mind-body, you see the hyphen in between it. And so that's showing you there's a connection. And so there has to be a connection between neck down and neck up. And so the mind is a control unit. It controls the body. So The Rock can't get through his 6 hours of leg day without the mental capacity and the fortitude to say, you can get through this, man. You're gonna have a great 6-hour workout. And so just like we get the oil in our car changed, we have to fuel ourselves and condition our bodies and our mind at the same time. And yoga is something that strengthens this connection. Reiki, that spiritual connection, those are other options that people have in the healing capacity. But a therapist or mental health counseling and therapeutic forms also strengthen this. And so you're not crazy if you sit on my couch or you're praying and going to church or streaming church at this point with COVID. And it's okay. That's okay.
Right. And so when you talk about, I do enjoy yoga. I need to do it a little more. But these things that give us into a space of mindfulness, right? So we think about offering a safe space for people on a couch or in church or wherever. Where are our safe spaces in our communities, like physical safe spaces? Because again, if we cannot call for support when someone in our family or someone that we are experience or encounter out in the streets, right? Where are these safe spaces, and how do we create safe spaces for those that are that we encounter day to day?
Great. No, so I'm from Tidewater, Virginia. I'm a product of, Hampton, Newport News, all the 7 cities. And something that was big for me growing up, as a child, it was either kitchen, recreation centers such as, say, YMCA, or a library, and not necessarily the library stacks, but there were always programs like, say, Young Astronauts or what have you. Now, I know we are in a pandemic, and I know quarantine has been mandated, and I do believe we as communal people are having a very hard time with this. So if you strike those other options down in public spaces and go for what you may have access to, most people have access to a kitchen. So if you can somehow get in there and nourish your body with like good mood foods, or make it a session, like a video session, call mom, call grandma to figure out how to make the yeast rolls, and that can be soothing for you, but it's in the safety of your home. And I know a lot of us sometimes more so recently, don't feel safe no matter where we go, even in our own homes. And so, I would just encourage you, if you can walk around the block, if you can chill on your balcony, sit on your stoop and people watch, speak to your neighbor. We live, next door to someone old enough to be my great grandparents, and I go check on them and I speak when I take the trash out. So, it's just make sure you're developing community at the same time, but you're being safe. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. And so it sounds like we need to stop thinking of safe spaces as this far away place, right? Some big shift that we have to make, and really just focus back on building community, right? And what I'm finding in this anti-cancel culture that we are building, it really, every episode, it honestly comes back to the relationships, the individual relationships that we have, and the community that we are intentionally building amongst those that we are in community with, that we interact with again. So going from our day-to-day community, our neighborhoods, to the world of social media, right? These are communities that we're establishing in the cyberspace as well. And unfortunately, the world of social media often places mental health as the brunt of jokes when people speak up about their experiences, particularly men right? And so should we cancel putting limits on how often a celebrity or an individual needs help? We might see people who speak regularly about these things. It's like, man, I've seen it on Twitter. Man, you always talk about you need to get a grip. You need to pull yourself together, whatever the case may be. But how do we shift the culture in cyberspace the same way that we're trying to do in our day-to-day lives?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we have to be mindful, back to your point of mindfulness. I think we need to be mindful of how we engage with social media and curate our own timelines about what we're consuming. But as far as someone telling you their story or their testimony or however they're phrasing it, I believe they should keep sharing it because you never know what light you're casting on someone else's darkness. And it may seem like, oh, well, I'm saying this to 20,000 people, but that very next 20,001 person that follows you could be amazed, by your story and learn something new. So I say keep sharing it because mental health, how mental health affects people is idiosyncratic, and all that means is individual. So even though someone next to you might have depression and you have depression too, your depression manifests different. Your depression is going to look different. So continue to share your story. It's not about likes. It's not about publicity stunts. It's you sharing your story for a reason and advocating for mental health stigma to be reduced. So I'm all for it. I do think, as a licensed mental health professional, and as, a licensed professional counselor, that there are ethics surrounding, say, what I do and how I hold space for individuals. And I know a lot of people think, well, all a therapist does is they just talk. And there's a lot of times where we have to hold space in private with people. So just because you don't see me on a talk show every day, just because you don't see me posting and blasting stuff on Twitter and Instagram, it doesn't mean that I'm not doing the work. And likewise, for that person that is voicing their concern, that doesn't mean that other people don't have depression or anxiety because they're not saying anything. They could be living in silence.
Right. So there are so many directions that I want to go in this, because I've dealt with mental health as growing up with a mother who suffered from mental health, multiple personality disorder. So I saw firsthand, with what calling the police or calling her sponsor, right? The difference between calling the police and calling the sponsor can do, the difference that it can make. Do you see a shift and have you ever worked directly with police departments as a professional yourself? Or is this a shift that you're seeing in law enforcement, that they're being trained in the area? Or do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So thanks for sharing that about yourself, first and foremost. And I personally have not. I have worked closely with various counties. So currently I hold a contract with a Virginia county, Fairfax County, and I have seen how that is done in that system from the periphery looking in, not necessarily the outside looking in. And I will say I have met with various higher ranking officers in Fairfax County Police who have explain how that process works. Now, I have had to make calls myself as a professional, and I'm very clear about what I'm asking for, and I'm very clear about remaining on the premises when whomever arrives. And if it's not what I asked for, then I follow back up and document and say, this is not what I asked, this is not what I called, and this is not what you said you were going to give me.
Right.
And so, as a professional and as a gatekeeper and as a Black woman, I understand what trauma that can cause for the person who is having said crises or some sort of episode, but also to the people involved, the ripple effect, the child who's watching, the loved one who gets the call and gets the news, and then the level of historic documentation that's created at that point, that goes in someone's record, whether legal or medical. So I am very mindful of that.
That's good. That's good. And so if you were to say anything to, before we get to any audience questions or anything, if there was one thing that you could share with our listeners and our viewers tonight, if they are in the supporting cast, if you will, right? If they are the family members of individuals, how should they go about? I'm trying to be careful about this because I know that, you know, every situation is different. Yeah. But you said one thing, you're very specific about the needs of the individual, right? And so how do caregivers, right, and loved ones go about being intentional about the information that they give when they call for support?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely identify yourself, identify the person, the age, and this is hard for a loved one. Mm-hmm. And I say this as a trained professional, but do the best that you can. Take the emotion out of it. Mm-hmm. And I know it's hard when you're making whatever call, but facts, as best you can, facts only. So, you know, Crystal Joseph is a 30-something-year-old African-American female. She came home at 5 o'clock, and then she started yelling by 5:30. She's not answering me right now. Mm-hmm. She does have a history of intellectual disabilities that may complicate things. I do have, say, her caseworker on standby. Mm-hmm. I just need help and assistance right now. They may ask, are there any minors in the area? You can say yes, they are being supervised. You can call a neighbor to witness and say, we're gathering effort. Please don't touch this person. This person is sensitive to touch. Mm-hmm. This person is triggered by the color blue. I mean, you can give as many details that you know. Mm-hmm. I do have an intellectual and developmental disability background. And given the recent issues where the authorities and the police have killed people with co-occurring the mental health and the intellectual disabilities, that's frustrating. Mm-hmm. That's very frustrating. And so it's the hard choice of, do I call? Who do I call? When do I call? But data is your best friend at that point. Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes it's hard because you don't know how to feel, and so your emotions may take over.
Wow, that is something. Look, I really wish that we could take this conversation on all night. 30 minutes is not enough time, but I'm glad that we're getting at least just a little bit of insight into a very big situation that we're going to have to continue growing with as we move forward as a community, as a people. Because again, this is something that the Black community is just really getting a hold of and beginning to unpack. So if you all have any questions, we're going to cut to a quick break, right? But drop your questions in the comments here, and we'll be back soon after our break to answer your questions and more with Crystal Joseph when we return with Anti-Cancel Culture.
Ever wish you had a devotional that was written specifically for entrepreneurs and in a voice you can relate to? Well, now you do. Big Idea Food, the best-selling devotional for entrepreneurs and creatives, is exactly what you've been needing to feed your entrepreneurial soul. This devotional will help you push past fears, build more time with God into your daily routine, and gain clarity on your next steps so you can build the business you know you were called to build. Big Idea Food is now on sale at bigideafood.com. Get your copy today, and remember, eat more, fear less.
I like it. Yes. Welcome back to Anti-Cancel Culture. We're having a great conversation with Crystal Joseph, who is a mental health professional, a licensed a licensed counselor.
Professional, counselors. Yeah, sorry.
No, she has all the letters. And so I want to make sure, I want to make sure that I get it right though. And she is a mental health professional and counselor based out of Silver Spring, Maryland. Shout out to the DMV. If you all have any questions, we are here for you right now. So please go ahead and drop those. I did see one before our break. Let's see what we have here. This is really good information. And again, I really wish that we had all night to have this discussion, because again, this is something that I've grown up with and many of us have, but there aren't many people that I even feel comfortable having a conversation with, because I don't feel like people really, there's still a stigma even in my own experience. And so even Velma says, y'all are getting deep into stuff that I never even thought of. And it's true. A lot of people don't think about these things, I even have loved ones who I know have friends who they had relationships with their parents who now as adults and as their parents have gotten over, they look back and were like, oh my goodness, who knew my mother was bipolar all these years? Here I'd have thought that, this was a typical Black mother. No, she had issues, right? Like there were issues that went unresolved, that there were things that we never even considered because, like you said, generationally, we just kind of, oh, well, that's just how mom is because that's how grandma was because, right?
Yep.
And so hopefully, go right ahead.
Absolutely. I recently took a training, shout out to Shauna Murray Brown on decolonizing therapy for Black folk. And something that was brought up that I will never forget is how something like that gets passed down the line with what you're saying of like, oh, well, that's just mom, that's just grandma. Whereas as for me, as a descendant of the enslaved, it's the thought of, well, maybe mom, grandma, great grandma, great acted that way to keep master's eyes off me. Where it was protection at first, but now it's derogatory and salacious, and it doesn't help the mother-daughter relationship. And it's now in our gene pool, and we're thinking, well, that's okay. That's how you talk to your child, and that's how you set an example. But that's not how we're living at this point, and we need a different type of relationship.
Resmaa Menakem came up. He's a psychologist out of Minnesota, and he has a book called My Grandmother's Hands, where he talks about how we literally, our bodies hold on to trauma and how it's passed down through our genes, like through our DNA, that trauma is there. Jonna says, Natural Glam TV says, how do we distinguish between just needing to speak with a therapist and diagnosable mental health issues?
Okay, that's a good thing. Well, I will say, I think certain shows have done a nice job of showing who a therapist can be and will be, especially as Black, Indigenous, people of color, if your therapist represents any of those. You can start on anyone's couch. You can access anyone that you believe is a good fit. Talk to them, and you can talk to them about, hey, I forgot to turn in my homework assignment today, and it's really plaguing me. That is okay. That's justified. That is more psychosocial or some sort of adjustment. It's not reflective of, say, a true chemical imbalance in the brain, which is where the medical boxy diagnosable mental health issues come up, is what I believe you're saying. So, it doesn't matter. You can sit and talk, and then as you're discussing with the professional, what should be happening is a conversation between the two of you, not just them saying like, tell me how that makes you feel, or oh, let me scribble and write down this diagnosis, and then you see it on your explanation of benefits, and you're trying to figure out, well, wait, why do I have this diagnosis? No one ever said anything to me. So, have that conversation. But I think everyone should try. At least in grad school, like it was almost mandated that we had to do it to see how it felt, even if you had if you had never had counseling before. And it's an experience, and therapists have therapists too. We don't have it. We're not perfect. We're not holier than thou. And I mean, if you have 20 to 30 people pouring into you about their stuff and you're holding space for them, I need someone who can hold space for me too.
That's good. I recently asked that on Twitter. Like, do therapists have therapists?
We do.
And I was thinking about it because I'm like, I know I'm the friend that people always call, right? To kind of, I'm that ear, I'm that shoulder to lean on, but I get weary. So I'm like, I can't even imagine what actual therapists go through. So having their own things to deal with and then taking on the weight of their clients and of those that they are assisting. Velma says, I have a cousin who isn't all there, as we say in our community, and they gave him medicine that just messed him up even worse. Okay. And I've seen that quite a bit, even down to children, my friends' children who may have ADD or ADHD, right? And then they give them a medicine and then they're like a zombie. Right. So go ahead. You already know.
sorry for cutting you off. My apologies.
No problem.
This is a lot. Okay, so I am not a medical doctor. I'm not a psychiatrist. However, we are trained to know what the medications do and how they interact with the body. A lot of what you're describing, the terms are like anxiolytic, so anti-anxiety, antipsychotic, antipsychosis. What it's doing in the body is it's completely numbing the pathway, so to speak. So you go from someone who has, say, erratic behavior, as the person you described in your community, to then they have the medication, and then 3 to 5 to 6 weeks, the therapeutic effect is supposed to happen. So they're supposed to have, this reaction, positive reaction to the medication. Instead, it ends up numbing them out completely like a zombie. And then you as the loved one are like, wait a minute, now you're like, a cardboard piece, box, like you have no emotion. It's we call it blunted. And so what that means is there has to be a level of advocacy with the prescriber. And again, data. We are a science. We do work off of data. So if you can take notes and numbers about when those things started to happen, and if there are any other things that person, like underlying things that person is dealing with. So if they're diabetic, there could be an effect based on the medication that could be having, and that needs to be looked at, because the body is a system. Remember, it's not just about the head. So there's hormones, there's a lot of other things, your adrenal system, there's a lot going on there. And as Black people, our stress levels are higher in some regard. So you have this whole axis going, and then you introduce a man-made medication that's affecting neurological pathways, and things are changing rapidly. So advocacy is the best. Please don't, if you're ever prescribed medication, please don't stop it cold turkey. Please talk to the prescriber and explain to them what is going on. So I do want to say that.
That's good. That's good. I have a couple questions here. Wow. Excuse me. Malcolm Eastman says, why do you think special education is so overlooked, when it comes to funding? For example, getting proper teachers and professionals on site to provide proper care.
That's a good question. So that goes back to home voting. It's voting season for those who do participate in that way. And it's not just about presidential. Please show up in your gubernatorial, your 2-year elections, and visit city hall meetings, board of education, some schools of board of education or superintendent meetings are open to the public. And something that my grandfather taught me is, if you show up to a city hall meeting and there's an open forum, it doesn't matter what the council member's agenda was prior to. If they have an open mic and you get up there to present your issue, such as this question, it is documented in that city's history. It becomes archived. So you state your question, you're posing it to the council members or to whomever, the Board of Education, the superintendent, and then it's documented, and thus someone should be following up with you, or you have the right to follow up, because now it's quoted in the city's records. And that wasn't something I learned until maybe 18 months ago. So, I think it's about advocacy, and I think it's about showing up in all aspects of life, not just when the big things start to pop off. It's just one of those things.
That's really good. That is a really, really good point. And I've recently had a lot of conversations around our civic responsibilities. And so this is something that I know is really important. So I just want to drive home that we really have to get out of the idea of that our votes don't matter, because we only look at the presidential elections. But there are things that we can be doing in our cities, and like you said, city hall meetings, city council meetings, all of those things are there where our voices can be heard and where that funding finds its direction, right? The people work for us, so we just have to put in work. So how can we process trauma with social media always presenting it? It's an ongoing cycle, but we're still trying to process at the same time. So what do we do?
Again, curate your feed. I know if you have Apple, and I'm sure Androids do it too, but you can set the timers for your social media activity and timing and how long you're there. Go through and figure out what is providing positivity in your life and what is negativity. Now, I know we have to stay informed as a people, and we need to know what's going on, but how much is too much? And so we call it trauma porn. And recently I've noticed Instagram has stepped up the game, and I don't know who to thank for that, but if there is a trigger warning or some sort of effect, they have now turned the screen black and white, and it says sensitive content, and then if you proceed to click through, then the video or what have you will play. I know certain mental health advocates and colleagues in my community, if they're speaking about something triggering, they put the disclaimer trigger warning, and they drop the spacing and then introduce whatever subject that they're talking about. So I would say if you need to take a social media break, if you need to delete the apps, there's something about the psychology of the coloring of the apps. There is a way to change the apps to a grayscale, the icons to a grayscale, so that you're not as inclined to tap on them out of reflex of what is triggering in your brain. I know it's all the things.
Look at me, I'm like, okay.
You can do that too. And then, just set your limits or post at certain times and get off, throw the phone, and, keep going. So, yeah, it's hard because you want to be entertained, you want to stay informed, you want to see what the latest music that's dropped, and then embedded in that, you have the trauma images and footage constantly being displayed.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that is a very good point. We have to keep in mind, I like how you said, it's almost like, and I try to remind myself that my timelines are like my Spotify playlist, right? I curate, right, what I want to see. Aaron Mitchell says, when one person is diagnosed, how can we help them not be so dependent on medication that is pushed for them to take?
Definitely advocacy. Now, if you're with the person and that person does want to take the medication, there's not too much you can do. The best you can do is research with them what the medication is hoping to achieve, what the side effects are, ask the rationale about the medications. But to your point, if I'm understanding your question correctly, we call it as needed. PRN, if you ever see on a medication label, it stands for pro re nata, which is Latin for as needed. And so when you're taking an as needed medication, it's a more fast acting medication. So some people will say have panic attack and need to take something for it to kind of calm them down because it's activating those channels very quickly. So dependent on it in that way, yes, because maybe they are a publicist or a news anchor and they have to calm down before, say, they get on air to provide us the news. Whereas dependent on what turns into overdependence and possibly some form of addiction, that can be an issue. Now, pushing them to take, I don't know if you mean, say, the medical provider is pushing and or someone in the community. But definitely, ask the right questions. See what the long-term effects are, how long will they have to take it, because mental health is lifetime, long-term management. A lot of things, if there is some sort of chemical imbalance, it's a lifetime diagnosis, so it's going to be a lifetime management. And antidepressants, we call it poop out. So there's a point at which your body gets where it no longer can process and metabolize that particular drug or medication. So then you're on to the next. And maybe that's what he's referring to. And so your body is trying to figure something else out. And so again, mindfulness, yoga, therapy, eating good foods, maybe seeing a naturopath as well, in combination with the psychiatrist, the prescriber, that might help.
Gotcha. And that's really good. Naturally Glam TV, and we're almost out of time. I really don't want to be. I think many of us avoid therapy because they think it's only for people who have a serious mental health diagnosis. They don't see the value of just speaking to a therapist for everyday life stuff. And it's true. I know that there are things that, And I think that a lot of times people are afraid of doing the unpacking, right? They're
Yes.
afraid of what all may come up, you know, the childhood trauma that may be. But there's a way to find what works for you, right? As an individual.
Yes, absolutely.
With couples and families, there are different levels to this thing. So how do we go about finding that person that works for us, or
No, directories, emails. I will say this: we are therapists. We're trained to be in session for hours at a time. We're not like at corporate looking at various screens and can get up and go get coffee. So please email us. Phone calls, people get upset if we don't call them back, and it's because we're in session or we're possibly overwhelmed with the events of the world. I will say, as a therapist, sometimes I'm one of the first people to hear that someone got a promotion, that someone's buying a house, that somebody is pregnant. There are so many positive things about what I do and that people are willing to share that fall under everyday life stuff. They just want to share. They just want to talk it out. And they know by law, I can't go run the streets and blast it to the world. So, just use it as a sounding board. It doesn't have to be this extreme thing. And also, you learn the coping skills so that when something does go wrong, your house on fire, your mental health house is on fire, something pops off, you know how to best contain it and put the fire out, because now you have the skill set. Right. Until you can maybe get to an appointment with your therapist, your personal therapist or whatever. That's good. That's good. Okay. We have to wrap up, but I'm going to take one more. Okay. I like the trigger warning on Instagram, but some people share the most horrible traumatic things. Yeah. That trauma porn. And I'm like, I don't want to see that. Yeah. It'll be a shooting, people fighting. Velma, I'm the same way. I don't want to see any of it. I honestly do not. My heart cannot take. I just can't. After May, I literally kind of shut down for like the whole month of June. I shut down. I was stuck. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to process. I was overwhelmed. And so I had to back all the way up. So that trigger warning is definitely something that we need to pay attention to. And except if it pops up, you don't have to look at it. You do not. Okay. We have to learn to save ourselves sometimes, right? And that fear of missing out, I think a lot of times is what keeps people always there. But the news will be there on Monday. I really try to take breaks on the weekends and like not get in, and I may miss headlines, but they will be there. The internet is always there for us. So if we feel like we've missed something, we can always go back and pick it back up. But after that, we've spent some time offline, we come to find that, we didn't really miss anything at all. So save yourselves, people. Please. Well, Crystal, I'm looking forward to seeing more of you on Instagram, getting to know more about you and your work. Maybe in the future you'll get to know more about me, because I am on the hunt for a therapist. We'll see where we go from here. But I thank you for your time. And we'll be back for another episode of Anti-Cancel Culture in a couple of weeks. You all, this is a lot of information. Okay. So I always encourage you. I want to encourage everyone that's listening right now to find Crystal online, find therapists in your own community and people that you can talk to, and just kind of find your place as it pertains to your mental health. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. Remember, you can catch us on Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Android TV, Google Chromecast, or your Apple TV. We are everywhere. Or at Apple, you can find the KL Jones Network, and you can download the KP Media TV app. And always, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook and on Instagram at Good News Co. Thank you again for watching Anti-Cancel Culture. There's so much more to give and so much more to learn, y'all. Download the KP Media TV app, and always, you can find us on YouTube and Facebook and on Instagram at Good News Co. Thank you again for watching Anti-Cancel Culture. There's so much more to give and so much more to learn, y'all. Let's go be the light. Peace. you.